Your opinions are actually not yours, and I'm gonna tell you why. Our innate tendency towards mass formation is a biological extension or reflection of the multicellular makeup of all higher organisms. We like to believe that we act out of reason, that our choices are conscious and our opinions self-made. But what if we're just not only absorbing the information of others, but also being kind of hypnotized by a mass? Because mass or crowd psychology is not always loud. It doesn't need people like screaming opinions or posters, propaganda. It doesn't need short form videos of propaganda I'm falling for and propaganda I'm not falling for. It's more of like whispers that you don't even notice. It is the moment where we stop thinking as ourselves and start feeling as one. Intelligence doesn't necessarily protect us from it. It actually just helps us rationalize the whole process. That's why many intelligent people also fall for, mass thought. And also we'll talk about how this could actually be a good thing, because if evolution has given us this crowd thinking, it's for something, and it actually can be a really good thing, but we just need to be aware. So yeah, in this video we'll not only discover why the mass can influence you, but also how it changes you as a person and how much weight it has on an individual and how much of you is just everyone else. Hi, it's Paula, your psychologist who's not a therapist, and without further ado, let's just dive directly into it. First things first, what is the crowd or the mass? First of all, it's not this mass, but that one. The crowd is a temporary collective of individuals under certain circumstances, being emotional or social, lose their sense of individuality and adopt shared set of impulses, emotions, and beliefs. And then mass psychology is the study on how individuals' thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors are influenced when they are part of a group. It examines what happens to the individual mind when it's submerged into the crowd, the changes in the individual, how they become a different person. I know, pretty interesting. And for this video, I dived into the mind of one of the most famous figures of psychology out there. Take a guess. You're probably gonna be right. Indeed, darling. It's the original troublemaker of psychology, Freud. And more specifically, I looked into his book, Mass Psychology and Other Writings. Though let's be honest, who's here for the other writings? No one's here for that. And if you're wondering what the hell has this poor book gone through, London weather. In this book, Freud discusses the theories of Gustave Le Bon. I'm not French and I totally butchered that and I dramatized it because why not? And also William McDougall on crowd psychology, of course. The former being one of the first professionals who popularized the crowd, because it's something that people had been theorizing since ancient Greece. But we only get empirical proof in psychology as, a science ever since the late 19th century. For instance, our friend Le Bon stated that whoever the individual is, regardless of their background, the fact that they have been transformed into a crowd puts them in possession of a sort of collective mind, which makes them feel, act, and think in a manner quite differently than what he or she would have done had they been alone. Quoting the man himself, the psychological crowd is a provisional being formed by heterogeneous elements, which for a moment are combined, exactly as the cells which constitute a living body from by their reunion, a new being which displays characteristics very different from those possessed by each of the cells slightly. Basically, it means that he sees humans as little cells. My hair is formed of different cells, and the cells itself, by themselves, are pretty different than my hair. The sum of all the cells are my hair. But my cells individually don't look like my hair. And with that theory, Freud states that there must presumably be something sticking all the cells together. And that binding medium must be precisely what characterizes the mass, which is mind-blowing and obvious at the same time. It's like, yeah, it makes sense, but like, how did you come up with that, man? And now, I'm gonna give you some examples of what the mask can actually be in real life. Because yeah, I'm talking about the mask this, the mask that, the crowd this, the crowd the other, but it's like, yeah, it's some sort of like mass thinking. Paula, please be precise. Okay, well, you know when your friend starts saying, I don't know, a weird catchy phrase and then you start repeating it yourself? Even when you're not with them, because this has certainly happened to me. And then I start repeating the weirdest phrases my friend says. And I'm like, girl, I'm becoming you. What the hell? The language we use, especially the colloquial one, it's directly correlated to the crowd way of thinking. And also the things that are highly popularized trends, whether it's fashion, music, ideologies, everything, this is some sort of like crowd thinking, because at the end of the day it's like a bunch, like majority of the people thinking one thing, but they don't necessarily know why they are thinking what they're thinking. And that's what I want to know in life. A great example is the Adidas Sambas. You know those awful shoes? I'm sorry, they are awful. I used to think that they were really freaking ugly, and I found myself last week in Andorra wanting to buy Sambas. I didn't. I stopped myself. I refuse to believe that I genuinely like Sambas, because the first time I looked at them, I was like, oh my god, they are like horrendous. And now I found myself trying to buy ones. I was like, oh, but they are red and kind of like golden also. Those are my favorite colors. I want to buy it. And then I was like, wait, do I? Because I used to think that they were horrendous, and of course my mind can change, but like that drastically? Because I don't think so. Is it because I've seen people wearing Sambas for the last year and a half every day? I do have a problem with those shoes. I'm sorry, they are horrendous. I refuse to think that I wanted to buy those because I believed that I genuinely wanted those, and I thought that they were beautiful. And this made me question, what is the crowd exactly? Because we have some sort of abstract idea, but we cannot like quite pinpoint it. We have people who have theorized, but we don't really know what the crowd is. Like, we cannot see it. And also, how does it exactly function inside our heads? We cannot necessarily measure it. Of course, we have some scales of, for instance, identity fusion, which I talked about it in this video right here. But like, how can we look at it? Like, I need a graphic. I need something, please. I need a graph. I need information that I can like see, but I cannot. And I really want to know it. So let's just theorize and analyze the situation. Because if the experts say that the greater part of our daily actions are the result of hidden motives that escape our observation, how can we know something when it is out of reach? And then Freud proceeds to link it to the unconscious. It's what he did for a living, you know? He stated that in the mass, the individual finds himself in conditions that allow him to shed the repressions of his unconscious drive impulses. Yeah, now we're talking about consciousness. Another abstract theory that you can actually not prove. Seems like I attract those quite a lot. Of course, I'm me, and I'm not Freud, and I don't believe in his theories. Therefore, I'm not gonna focus on the unconscious. Of course it exists, but I love to focus about consciousness. If both Levon and Freud believed that the effects of the mass in the individual were some sort of like hypnotization that diminished the consciousness of the being, that means theoretically there's a correlation between the mass and consciousness, and it's inversely proportional, and I cannot prove it. Okay, Freud also stated that having entirely lost his conscious personality, he obeys all the suggestions of the operator who has deprived him of it. and commits acts in utter contradiction to his character and habits. Okay, so it's it's a decrease in consciousness. I need to know. I genuinely want to know. Small bracket, I was talking about this to my mom and she was like, you think a lot, don't you? And I responded with yeah, but like, life's boring if I don't. That says a lot about my character. That says a lot. Hi, it's Paula from the future, and whenever we think about consciousness and the social forces that play along with it, we realize that there's a correlation in between consciousness and the social forces. And the more one exists, the less the other. Okay, but what is the cause? You know, it's really difficult to pinpoint the cause. So I wanted to get informed. And turns out that consciousness, you know, we need to see it as some sort of like difficult mechanism that we need to separate, okay? First of all, I think it's really interesting, the concept of consciousness itself, because whenever we're watching a movie, whenever we see Bugs Bunny in TV, we know that he's like a conscious being, but at the same time, we know that he's not. So part of our brain believes that this thing has consciousness so that we can enjoy the TV show. But at the same time, we know that it's not true. So we kind of like buy into the false reality for our benefit. And it's like, wait, do we do that in other instances? Let's just think about, why do we know about our brains? And you only know about your brain because it like has acquired a bundle of information and it has made imperfect models out of it to understand yourself and others. And that is like amazing, but at the same time it's like, wait, there's a lot of room for mistakes. And the issue is like, what's the true reality? The one I've constructed with mistakes, or the actual one that it's really hard to measure? And then we have the theory of mind. What the fuck is the theory of mind? Well, it's basically a reconstruct brain of the other person. Like, imagine you and I are talking, okay? I'm talking to you, you're talking to me. And whilst you're talking to me, you are constructing an image of my brain. Not literally, but more of how I work, like what I'm thinking in the back of my head. And I'm also doing that. Whilst I'm talking to you, I'm also thinking about what you may be thinking but not saying, so I can, you know, have a better conversation with you. And that's actually a great tool, but at the same time, it's so easy to be flawed because it's a simplified explanation on how the brain works. So basically we develop beliefs of our mind and other people's minds that are inaccurate because they're based in our notions. And that's when we can separate consciousness into two. The first one is the more computational one. You know, it works like ChatGPT. The more information you give it, the more context it has to get a better result. It's like large language models. And then we have this other theory of mind type of consciousness, the one where the brain tries to construct things. It's also a predictive mechanism, but it's not rooted in the information it's already given, but rather so much more, I don't want to sound like, I want to be scientific here, but it's much more mysterious and kind of like we cannot pinpoint the origin, you know? I think it's one of the things that science will know the answer to in the next, I hope it's not decades, but like, yeah, years or decades, and I'm really interested in that. And neuroscience has made a lot of advancements on that. So if you want to know more about it, just yeah, feel free to comment or say, because I think it's really interesting to know. So like, because at the end of the day, this is my consciousness trying to understand itself, and probably yours too, which is. So if we have these two types of consciousness, the first one, the computational one, it's really not easy, but at least easier than the other to just pinpoint and study and understand how it works and it functions. And that's, as I've said, what AI is doing. But this doesn't necessarily involve some personality traits that are what makes us ourselves, you know, the irrational part. I'm not saying that this is rational and this is irrational, by no means, but that there are some like differences indeed. But now we need to know this like mysterious type of predicting consciousness. Why do we have it and why is it helpful? Guys, if you know me, and if you didn't, now you know, I'm not a huge advocate for evolutionary psychology, for instance, because you cannot make accurate studies. The only thing you can do is understand, like, make predictions based on our biology and historical records that could or could not be skewed, and you cannot separate the environment from the biology. So I just think it's a bit useless. Sorry, not sorry. But what we cannot avoid and we cannot just undermine is that if consciousness exists, it's in part due because that helps us with evolution. And one really important thing about evolution is human cooperation, and another one is human consciousness, so being aware. But if we've said that the more, social cooperation and like social identity, the less consciousness, like there's a difference, that's not good. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So now we're gonna talk about how consciousness contradicts evolution. First of all, this is not necessarily true, okay? That was a bit clickbaity, because consciousness can help with things like empathy and moral reason, which actually is a good thing, because if not, we would go around killing the people who are very loud in the metro. And I know that's not good, because I have consciousness. If not, I'm not saying I'd be guilty of it, but it's really annoying. Which enables pro-social behaviors that enables for us to be together, not hurt each other, and live in a more harmonic way. Then we have the theory of mind that I've said, you try to predict the other person's brain so that you can cooperate better and have better understanding of the other person, at least, in order to build trust and to don't feel like other people are a threat. And then we also have things like, sharing goals, planning, creating group identity. Those things that are enabled by consciousness, because you have to be aware of a problem to get involved into a group with people so that you can change something. This is good, but at the same time, consciousness can interfere with cooperation. To me, that's the first thing that came to my mind. Because the more critical and analytical you are towards something, the less likely you are to believe it as an absolute. Therefore, the less likely you are to form a group or be part of a group and to root for an idea, yes or yes, and black and white thinking. So this is certainly interesting. Because there should be then a plateau. Because that leads us to believe that maybe there's a plateau of consciousness where more of it would make us fall into despair and not believe anyone. But now, is it possible? Are we? Because there's theories that, of course, nowadays we have more consciousness that they used to have 100,000 years ago. 100,000 years ago, people didn't have as much consciousness as we have now. The thing is the trend going further and further and further? And is consciousness the reason why we are all alone? I don't think so. Consciousness also habilitates us to form better relationships. Therefore, we don't get scammed. Therefore, the answer doesn't lie in being overly critical, but using it for the better, understanding that we can get scammed, we will not get scammed, but we can also trust people. And this is certainly interesting because consciousness feels like a double-edged sword. I believe that in the next years a lot more information will be shown, and that will be amazing. But yeah, guys, with all that information said, I want to ask you, do you think we can trust ourselves? Because I am not sure. There's a bunch of information and correlations out there that we are yet to find the cause, and the intrigue is probably killing me. But not killing me in a bad sense, killing me in the I need to know, therefore I'm just gonna keep looking for more information. And I want to know if you think if you can trust yourself, because I do believe that I can trust myself because I'm a conscious being, but at the same time I'm highly influenced by people and the society. But the thing is, it's part of me. It's a fundamental part of me that I'm a social being. Therefore, I'm influenced by people around me, and not even people. A lot of psychologists have literally made circles of influence. Bronfenbrenner made the theory, the ecological theory, I'm gonna put it right here. It's really interesting because you can get to know the layers of, it's just a theory, like it doesn't necessarily need to be true in all cases, but it's, I would say it's easy for everyone to just look at it and analyze the situation and be like, oh my god, I'm really like influenced by a lot of things and to different levels. And if you want me to make a video on that, I would love, because it's something I did in my first semester and it's really interesting. It's just, it opens your mind to understand the layers of complexity influence has on a human being, especially from a very young age. So yeah, if you're also really interested in those things, don't forget to subscribe if you feel like doing so. That would be amazing. And if you want to know why targeting a bunch of influence towards the youth is literally the way to go, you can click on this video that I made a while ago, which is really interesting. And if not, I don't know, keep going on with your life. Have a nice week. I'll see you in the next one.